Yeah. Chinese horoscope. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
That's just solely based on year, right? I feel like I'm
That's based on year. Yeah.
like a rat or a ram or something like that.
Yeah, those are different but sound similar. Okay, let's see. Some of the 12 signs. Uh-huh. Okay, here we go. You're a sheep.
I'm a sheep. I'm definitely not a sheep.
Yeah.
Pretty far from a
Sheep,
sheep.
well, you know what? It sure looks an awful like a lot like a ram. So I would say that
That doesn't have a.
it is a
It's
ram.
got the horns on it.
Yeah. It says sheep, but like you're clearly a ram,
Yeah,
so
I'm a big horn sheep. Big
yeah.
horned. I'm big horned,
You're
Shannon.
big horned. I'm a
Yeah.
dragon.
Oh, you're such a bad. Why do you get all the good
Horned.
ones?
A
What's up,
dragon, a leopard.
YouTube people?
Oh, hi.
How you
I
guys
forgot.
doing?
I forgot about
Yeah.
this. Oh, that means I got
Oh,
to do the intro because Zach is coaching
that's right.
some
Zach
sports right
is. We're
now.
sans Zach this
I'm not
week. I feel
prepared
like
for that at all.
Daniel Barry Sports Highlights. I feel like that's a new. I don't remember seeing that face before. That handle. Hey Daniel, if you're new. Hey Daniel, if you're not new.
Oh, Daniel Barry Sports Highlights. Agreed.
I don't remember seeing that one before.
First in. What's up, Daniel?
First one
Hi,
here. Bam.
Chantel. Hi,
I want to
Megan. Hi, Hannah. Hi,
see
Michelle.
if Michael R. Bussing pops in because
Hi.
he.
Oh. Hi, Caroline. Hi,
Well,
Susan.
well, he texted me last week and he was like, "What the hell?" I looked on YouTube and your thing came up and it had the live streaming thing at the bottom of it. He's
Yeah.
like, so I watched it and I got 20 minutes in before I realized it wasn't live.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that was a replay, but it
Mike,
still
pop
has
on
that on there.
in, buddy.
And he asked me when we stream because he's watched us a couple times. One time he commented, a couple times he watches in the shadows. But he has said
He's
that
a lurker.
he really enjoys our stream and wanted to know when we're streaming so he could come watch and be a part of it live. So
Oh.
we'll see. That
Well,
could all be
now we're all
bullshit.
going to
He
be
might have been
crushed if he
drunk when
doesn't
he
show
said
up.
that. Yeah, I didn't
Also
have to tell you
possible.
that. Just like
Yeah.
your buddy didn't have to tell you that he
How
was
are
an
the
earthworm.
dogs? How's all that going?
Good. He said they're super busy. Like
Great.
he's shocked at how how many people need their dogs babysat.
Great.
Uh, yeah, so things are going really well.
Very
He sends
cool.
me pictures of the deer in his backyard all the time. It's
Aw.
pretty. He's real happy. He's far
But
away.
he's
I'm
so
hoping
far away.
this fall. This fall doesn't suck because the things I'm doing are like cool things. Like I'm going to Colorado for that elk hunt, and I'm going to Obsessed Fest, and um, but man, I have no weekends like but I usually go up north and go bird hunting with a group of guys,
Yeah.
and they're all like, "Let's go up, let's do like a grouse camp, do like a long weekend." I'm like, first of all, I can't do long weekends. Second of all, when
Yeah.
you want to go, I'm like, and that's when I'm realizing like, oh nope, not that weekend. Nope, not that weekend. Nope, not that
Yeah.
weekend. I have, and that was a point where I told Becky, I'm like, well, seems like I should just go ahead and winterize the boat because I don't know when I'm ever going to go fishing again this year. So
Yeah.
everything is jam packed.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I wanted to do, Mike lives where he lives up in the thumb of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
That area is one of the few places in Michigan that still has a native pheasant population and has a pheasant season.
Oh.
I was like, man, I can come stay with you guys for a couple days, take Mac, we'll go out and
Yeah,
do
take
do some
Mac.
hunting, have a good time. But it's not going to happen.
Oh, by the way, the last time we took Jasper to the beach, which was I can't remember. It was a few days ago, and it was definitely like I can't do this anymore. I have to stop working. Let's please go to the beach.
Yeah,
For the dog. He started chasing. He started like out of nowhere. As many times as he's been to the beach, he is suddenly became obsessed, almost as if he heard me tell you the story about that birding dog.
yeah.
Suddenly out of nowhere, is not interested in birds on the beach, but is obsessed with any stilts, any pelicans, any bird flying across the water at a great distance. He has
He's
now
obsessed with it.
decided, I've got to get out there. That
He's
dog
a bird
can't
dog.
swim. He's not big and he's not like he can't swim. So he can wade out until he gets uncomfortable and then he bounds back in. But he was going crazy. And again, he has seen that many, many times. But all of a sudden, he's like,
He heard
this is
me.
my
He heard
dog
us
now.
talking about it. He
It
heard us
must have been.
talking about it.
It must have been.
But I definitely feel your pain because I was like that. We went for with the dogs too. The other night I was out here working was Sunday night, and it was like 8 o'clock, and finally I was like, the sun's going down. I just went inside. I'm like Becky, we have to go for what? We've got
Yeah.
30 minutes before the sun's down. I have to move. I've been at a computer.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you all day. Let's go. So like we went for a walk out where we normally go down the road, and then came back, and I was like, well, let's go for a walk on the property too. It's still not dark yet, so we let the dogs off of off their collars, and we
Yeah.
went for a walk in the back and let them run around. It was like just like I've got to get out
Yeah, yeah.
of here.
My
You
eyes
know,
start to get so bloodshot from like staring at a computer and stuff. I'm sure many people in the chat can relate to that.
yeah, and I can't believe I haven't asked you this, but you're all doing all this work. What are you working on?
Ugh, it's just a bunch of everything. It's like Sketchfest is in full swing, so that's a
Yeah,
huge part of it. As you know, I like to put in some time on Truth and Justice just for funsies because I get obsessive. So at
yeah.
11:30 at night, I might be reading certain things that certain people have sent me because I'm like, I will not sleep until I've read this every single sentence.
I saw
Um,
I saw that. So little inside baseball. I sent Janet my script for the uh, third installment of the reply briefs of the Adnan Syed case, so she could kind of fact check it and look through it. And I woke up in the morning to see a text from you at 2:36 a.m. my time.
yeah,
It said, "Check your email. I sent my notes."
yeah, yep. I was into it. I was into it for sure.
I'm pretty excited about this. I'm super excited about that. Oh, Kelly wanted me to. So Kelly Zappas is helping try to arrange some like interviews for us for the kind of these
Nice.
filler
Thanks, Kelly.
episodes. And so she said, "Can I ask what topics people would like to hear interviews about?" So I don't know if you'd be here or if I should
I
maybe on
definitely
the
think
real
it
show.
shouldn't be here because
Yeah,
here. Well, just anything like that. We tend like it's hard to sort of preserve the YouTube because it just scrolls up, 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 and then it's hard to catch all of the suggestions when they're live.
yeah.
Is that
So
what you're
maybe
saying?
when we're yeah. So Kelly, if when we start the show at some point, remind me that, and I'll what I'm going to tell them to do is in the fan group just tag you if there's
Okay.
something you'd like to hear about.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, so we can figure that stuff out. I'm super excited about Luke Mitchell's case.
Yeah.
I can see this going
It's so
anywhere
intriguing.
from 4 to 6 to 8 episodes. Like I sat down to start writing today, and it's been a minute since I've like written an episode like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's not I've been like writing the prosecutor stuff, but then I'm like beat going beat for beat and countering and doing
Yeah.
research on that, but just to like do some research and create a script out of it. And I was just like flowing because it's super super duper interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and now even though I
And we,
worked my entire Labor Day weekend, all 4 days, it was pretty sweet that the Adnan Syed episode, as of yesterday, I already had it done and published and ready to rock and roll yesterday. I've already got a big
nice.
chunk of the so I'm because last week, man, I was when we were recording the follow up last Tuesday night, I hadn't finished writing the Adnan episode yet. And it had to come out on Wednesday. So Wednesday and I taught Wednesday. So when you guys got that episode on Wednesday, that was a stay up late, finish writing, get up early, record it, edit it, get it done, and get it out. All that. But this week, that's already done. I can actually. My goal this week is to get a week ahead so that I don't lose
Yeah.
my mind
You'll do it.
over this week.
You'll do it. You'll definitely
I
do
actually took and did. I haven't had to do this in a long time, but I took like on my whiteboard. I have like like Monday. These are the tasks that I want to da 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 da. And Tuesday da 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 da. And I not quite kept up with them, but I'm pretty damn close to the stuff shuffling down. And I've left a little enough room that I can shuffle some stuff down. But
Nice.
because Saturday, Becky and I are going to Detroit to go see Chappelle, which
Ah, nice.
I realize as I say that
Nice.
some people may not care for him. But I think he's a good
Yeah.
comic. So we're going to go see.
Oh, listen, the prosecutors are on True Crime Garage. Well, that's good. That means it's almost a certainty that they will agree to do just a crossover, like a friendly crossover fact-checking episode with you. Like, there's literally no reason to cite not to if they're going on True Crime Garage and stuff. So that's
Right.
cool. I look forward to that.
Yeah. Hopefully that's what that means.
I'm sure it does.
Mhm.
I'm sure it
I
does.
should real quick. I should check
yeah.
my messages from Brett because he told me he would get back a hold of me to do the crossover as soon as they were done with their coverage.
Nice. But Kelly, thank you honestly so much for taking that on and helping find resources and stuff. That's incredibly cool. That's incredibly cool.
Oh, you're chopping up on me. Hang on. I'm just seeing that. Nope. But I will reach out to them again because obviously they're open to it. I want to listen to that too and see how that goes because I don't know where Captain and Nick landed after that. They were very very persuasive, which I guess we could probably start the show and get into some of that.
Yeah, let's start it.
Are you prepared to do yourself a little intro? Do you need the theme song to do it? That's loud.
That's
Oh,
helpful.
was that super loud for you? It was
Yes, it
loud
was
for me.
very, very loud. It was very
uh,
loud. Okay.
Zach, Zach is not here. Zach is coaching, so he's not gonna be able to make it tonight.
Yeah,
We believe.
that
Our
is
on True Crime Garage today.
true.
Interested to see what Nick.
Yeah. And Chris, I see your little note about that Bob made it sound in the beginning like he was going to turn on the mic and talk. I think you were planning on doing that, but then there were so many facts that you had to follow up on because there was so much that you were surprised to hear was being
Yeah,
said that you literally were like, "Oh, there's just
Chris.
a lot. There's a lot here that I'm going to have to deal with."
Chris, 2023 has been the year of me putting my foot right squat in my mouth. And that was one of the instances. Believe me, I wish that that's what I was doing, was just going. And it's
Well,
not full
yeah, I don't
script.
think it
The
hasn't been
problem
easy to do
is,
that.
at least with these episodes I'm doing right now, is they say something that I know is incorrect.
Right.
So then I have to go find all the source documents. I spend 2 hours researching to find out what is actually correct. And then it's in order to do that, in order to like make sure it's clear that I'm not just making shit up, then I need to quote and cite the source when
Right.
I'm doing it, right? So I'm not going to do, yeah. Well, according to Debbie, Adnan was going to track practice. Let's move on. I'm not going to
Right.
do that because I'm here accusing them of giving false misinformation. So I'm saying, no, here's what Debbie actually said, quote.
Right.
And so
Right.
like that is taking me much more time than I had thought it was going to.
Yeah. Um, well, everyone can enjoy the fact that, of course, I'm, as always, totally unprepared to do what Zach does so brilliantly and do the intro. So I'm sure that there will be plenty of opportunity for us to take a turn at laughing at me because I don't have a plan.
Listen, I try to be much better behaved now that I'm doing the editing because I don't
Yeah,
want to.
that's true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
All right. So we ready to hit record and start, or do you need a
Yeah,
minute?
let's do it.
1, 2, 3, record. I don't know why I count on. We don't count before I say record. We count before the clap, which we're about to do.
Yes.
1, 2, 3.
Ahoy, friends! You are listening to the Friday follow up for season 13 and our episode entitled The Wrongful Conviction of Luke Mitchell. And in that episode, Bob did cover some very initial facts about the Scottish case of Luke Mitchell and the death of Jody Jones. But for the first half of the episode, he shared his thoughts on the final conclusion of the prosecutor's series on the Adnan Syed case. So we have a couple of different topics to cover today, plenty of wonderful feedback and questions from our listeners. So let's jump into it. But before we do that, Zach, we miss you.
Did I miss it? Did you mention that Zach is not here?
No, I just said it.
Oh, you said Zach, we miss you. Yeah.
Zach, we miss you. You can't be here today. You are being an amazing dad and coach. And
No, that's
so
not
I
what we
was
do.
forced to
That's
step
not.
into your shoes.
We do it like this. After you say, Zach, we miss you, then I come in and say, that's right. Zach is on assignment today. We are sans Zach. He should be back next week, but he's got a very important assignment that he's doing right now. So we've got a lot of stuff to cover, and kind of in all different spectrums right now, because we've got a ton of questions about the stuff I covered about the Adnan Syed case, as you mentioned, in the prosecutor's final episode. We've got stuff on the Luke Mitchell case, which I don't think we'll get too deeply into because we're just starting to deep dive. That was just kind of a 30,000 foot view. I also have a missing persons case of the week that I want to touch on. We'll hit this up top, but also, Janet, you have an update, a sad update about your missing persons case.
I do. For those of you who were with us on the live stream when we recorded last Wednesday, you know that there was a case that we talked about that by the time the recorded episode aired on Friday, the case of the missing Miriam Toure Sila, really like an hour after I had made my post on the Truth and Justice Facebook page about Miriam, there was an arrest made and an announcement that her remains had been found. It was really upsetting, very sad. Her remains were found, and there is a person in custody. They have, if you read about it, you'll see that, for what it's worth, the police have put forth kind of a lot of information about why they think this person is responsible. Seems like there's a lot of damning evidence, of course, innocent until proven guilty, but regardless, it was a very, very sad outcome, and I'm sure her
The
family,
timing
and her
was
school, are
insane.
yeah, devastated. Yeah, that was very strange. It was very strange that we had just done that, and then that happened.
And it's true, 'cause from what I understood, that it seems like the police had actually located her remains like months ago.
I don't think that's what it was. I think that
Okay, maybe I misunderstood that.
had him. Well, they had him in custody already, but it was for an assault. I think it was for. It might have been domestic violence. But he was already in custody. But I'm just looking really quickly to see. Yeah, I'm not immediately seeing when her remains were found, but
I might have
don't
misread.
think they sat on that that long.
Yeah, I was reading through a bunch of stuff, so I might have misinterpreted that, because the way my brain is telling me that it was that they had found her body, but they weren't
Oh, you know
releasing
what?
that
You're right.
information.
On August 1st, a concerned citizen contacted the Prince George's County Police
Yeah,
Department
they
to
didn't.
report possible human remains found outside in Clinton.
That's right, and they weren't identified.
That's
was the
right.
thing.
And so they were waiting for testing, which is
Mhm.
oh, yeah, that's
Yeah. So they had found the remains about a month prior to, almost exactly a month prior to, but they were unidentified.
and they were still doing press conferences and stuff, just begging for
Yeah.
information. But it does make you wonder what's going on behind the scenes if they have this, the suspicion that perhaps it will turn out to be her, and that they still
Yeah.
have to do everything they can to try to find out
Well, the
if
first
it
thing I
isn't,
thought
and if
of,
not,
yeah, the first thing I thought of was when you were sharing the case. Remember, I was asking, like, because they were keeping everything so close to the vest that it seems like they're treating it as foul, and it seems like maybe they're on to
And they
something.
had her son in custody,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
for charges that, so that was all very strange too. Yeah.
But yeah, and the timing of
Oh,
it
it's
worked
awful.
out. We recorded the information. Janet shared the case when we recorded Tuesday. That went live at 6 a.m. on Friday morning. Later in that morning, Janet got on and made a post with all the information about the case, and literally like 45 minutes after that, the press release came out that
Yeah.
that her remains were found.
Yeah.
So I mean, it obviously is a tragic end, not what anybody was hoping for. But from the work that we've had, and the discussions we've had with family members that are in this situation, it's absolutely the worst case scenario. But at least there's an
It's an
answer there.
answer.
They have an answer
Absolutely.
at least. So that's done. So our thoughts are with her family, and hopefully that justice is served correctly in that case. And
Yeah.
while we're on that topic, I'm going to share this week's missing persons case. This one comes out of Arizona. This is actually a case that I've been, I had on the docket for a while. I've actually spoken with Jarrett's parents. I was it was one of the ones that I kind of had sitting in the back burner, because we were doing this real deep dive and crowdsourced, and you'll see why in a minute that I was a little hesitant and a little concerned.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that, it was just I didn't know what to do with it. And so here's the thing. So Jarrett Brooks from Joseph City, Arizona, he disappeared on the 4th of July this year. So now we're now, at the time of recording this, it was now 2 months ago.
Okay.
So in his case, he was sounds like there's no history of any kind of like behavior problems, any substance abuse problems, anything like that. He has no history of behavioral issues. He had gotten in trouble, and his parents grounded him, and so he was grounded, and I believe he lost his phone too. And then there was a night they came back on the 3rd of July, I believe, where or might have been on the 4th, where he wanted his phone back, and they said, no, you're still grounded, you still don't have your phone. And
Mhm.
then he just disappeared. So it sounds like he, on his own volition, ran away.
Hmm.
The reason that I was trying to figure out how exactly, I'm sorry, people in the chat are asking how old he is. He's 16 years old. I'll get into all of his information. Is because when he left, the parents owned a handgun and Jarrett left with the gun. That's
Mm.
all he had. And that's why I had told his parents this. I'm like, I'm so new to this. I don't know. I don't want to send people out, looking for him if he's dangerous. And it was much fresher than obviously when all this was going on too. Um, but they saw him leaving, and he had taken that handgun with him. And again, this is 2 full months ago. He was last seen on the 4th at around 6:30 a.m. crossing a neighbor's field, and then since then he has just completely vanished. And
Mm.
obviously, he was like many teenagers, was having a conflict with his parents. He was upset because he was grounded. That explains why maybe he took off, but he hasn't been seen since. And from everything that that I've learned about these cases since, and particularly even when these teenagers may leave by themselves, oftentimes they end up in very dangerous situations. And this is and at this point, this is getting very, very, very concerning because it's been 2 months. No one has seen him. No one has heard from him. There is an anonymous donor who offered a $50,000 reward
Hmm.
for anybody that can help find Jarrett Brooks.
Is
Um,
is
Go ahead.
that on the res? I'm from Arizona, and I know I believe Joseph City is just a handful of miles. I think it's like southeast of Winslow, which is the town very close outside to where my aunt lives. And I know that the Zuni and Hopi and well, the Navajo res are like right there. So I didn't know if it was if
I
it's an
don't think they
Arizona
didn't.
case or if it's considered a reservation case. I'm curious.
So he's a white male.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's Native American, and they didn't say anything about it being on the res, but it is in exactly the area you're talking about. The family's hired a private investigator, Harder Investigations, to help find him at this point. Plus, the sheriff's department's looking for him. So Jarrett is 16 years old. He's 6 foot tall, 140 pounds. So he's pretty slight of build. He's a thin guy. He's white. He has blonde hair, and his hair, at least in the picture they have, is kind of cut into kind of a mullet. Um, he has blonde hair, brown eyes, and he has a faint cleft lip scar. It's and when I put the post up on Friday, you'll see it. It's not a super noticeable one, but you can definitely tell there's a scar there on
He had
his
his
lip.
surgery when he was a wee one.
Yes. Yep. He was last seen wearing a black T-shirt with America across the front, blue jeans, cowboy boots, and a baseball cap. Anyone with information about the case is asked to either contact Harder Investigations, that's the private investigator, and their phone number is 480-904-2628. And I'll have these in the show notes too. So if you have any information, you can definitely go there. Or you can call the Navajo County Sheriff's Department at 928-524-4050. And if you go, there is a Facebook page dedicated to his, and I don't have it written on my paper here. I'll put a link to it in the description to the Facebook group. And if you just look up Jarrett Brooks missing on Facebook, I know that it comes right up because I was on it earlier today. And there's also a GoFundMe attached to that if anybody wants to help donate to help them assist with paying the private investigators and stuff like that to try to find Jarrett Brooks.
Hmm.
So this one is it's a critical case, again, out of Joseph City, Arizona. 16-year-old Jarrett Brooks, 6 foot tall, 140 pounds, white, blonde hair, brown eyes with a faint cleft lip scar. And all of this information will be in the show notes if you didn't catch it all right when I just shared it. So please, if you get on the Facebook page, if you're in the area, be on the lookout, share the posts that we make, and share the posts from their Facebook page to help see if we can find Jarrett Brooks. And with that, we'll move on from our missing person of the week case. And we'll start getting into the episode that we just there is one more thing that I've been meaning to mention on the Truth and Justice podcast fans page. Ed Ates had, and we've talked about this before, he, from the lack of dental care from 20 years in prison,
Mm-hmm.
has all kinds of problems, like tens of thousands of dollars worth of dental work that he needs to have done. And Danielle Rohr has helped. One of our listeners has helped like find a dentist that's willing to work for basically just material costs. We've got great discounts there, but there's a GoFundMe set up right now for Ed, and it's pinned to the featured posts on our Facebook page. So if anybody is open to and willing to help Ed get his surgery done, we hit the first goal, which I think was
Yeah, I got that
$2,000.
email.
Yeah, we hit the first goal uh to get, and I don't remember what one phase of the work that he needs to
Right.
have done. But there's more. I know Ed. I've talked to Ed about, he's in a lot of pain, and it's a lot. And this was just from 20 years in prison where they just don't take care of them. So
Yeah.
if that's something that that you're open to helping out with, please go on the Facebook page and check out that GoFundMe and see if we can help Ed get his teeth fixed, so he'll have bright and shiny and not hurting smile when he comes to Obsessed Fest in just a couple months.
The man has a great smile. They didn't take away his smile, but
That's
got to
right.
help him out with the teeth part.
Yep. All right. So now onto the episode. Janet, first of all, have you listened to the prosecutor's closing argument? I know you've been having some reactions to listening to it, so you've kind of avoided listening to a lot of it. So you have not listened to their closing?
I haven't. Part of it is that I really honestly haven't had time because, like you, I worked through the weekend. But it's just there's so much ugliness around all of this right now that it's not even the episode itself. It's just the bullying that's happening, kind of all around the internet. That it makes me so tense. Like I
Yeah,
have
you
trouble
mentioned that to
sleeping when
me,
things
and to be fair, it comes from both sides. It's from
No, for
the
sure.
guilty
I'm making a
crowd,
general
yep,
statement.
and the innocent crowd are really kind of, and that's what there. And I've said this a few times, but they're, with what I'm doing with kind of going counterpoints to what Brett and Alice presented. There's been people that jump on that, that we're fighting and arguing, and I'm trying very hard to make clear that's not all it is. They did the work that they did, and they presented the case the way they presented it. I just there's something in me that I can't just sit back and let misinformation, which may be unintentional in some places,
Sure.
but there's misinformation that's out there, and that I need to make sure. For me, it's just one of those things that I can't sleep on it. I feel like I have the platform, and I have the case file, and I have the information to correct
Of
the
course.
record, and I at least want to put it out there to people that are open to that. I'm not trying to be negative about their work. I'm not trying to give them a hard time or fight with Brett and Alice. I'm still hoping, Brett said that when they were done, that we could get together and do a crossover episode. And that's what I really am hoping happens. I just heard today that they apparently are on True Crime Garage having a conversation. So it seems like they're definitely. He told me they would. Now they're doing it, so they seem open to uh, going on other shows to talk about the work that they did on it. So I'm hoping that they do that, where we can just have an open discourse and discussion about these things. And for those that, I'm doing the Patreon bonus series where we're digging deep into the weeds and all of this stuff, like everything in every one of their episodes. I'm trying to avoid in that series to, argue about opinions and strictly sticking to facts. So like if they say this happened, I'm bringing up the case file, the case material, the source document, and saying this is what was said. Sometimes it's exactly what they said, sometimes it's not, but we're getting in deep into the weeds. And in that process, if you listen to the Patreon bonus episode that will drop tomorrow, I found something that I don't think anybody has ever discovered. That this has been an interesting process for me, because I was looking into one of the elements they talked about, and in the research, I'm like, wait a minute, not only are they wrong about this, everybody's wrong about this. This is not what was said. So
It's really interesting. But I
yeah,
wonder if information came somewhere else later that sort of ended up feeling like it's superseded for people, especially if it's like his own attorneys and stuff. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to
yeah, I don't know. From
get
what I've
into
seen
that.
so far, I'm kind of holding back on it too, because I want to make sure when I get feedback from it, if somebody's like, nope, it was from right here.
Right.
But I did more research today than what I talked to you about the other day, and
Yeah.
it seems to be confirmed
How
from
about
what I've
that?
seen. So
Interesting.
anyway, but yeah, so that's going on. So you heard my kind of take on their final theories, what seemed to be closing arguments to me, but you
Mhm.
haven't heard their final theories to really have many thoughts on it.
No.
No.
I
So
mean, I don't. No one needs to read anything into that.
yeah,
I just need to. I just yeah. I'll get there. I'll get there. But I
yep,
also haven't listened to the entirety of their. You know, I've
their
been listening.
series.
Yeah. I've been when I have time. I've been listening to their episodes you know, I'm very familiar with them and so I want to do it in order. But it was hard not to do it in order. Like it was,
Yeah.
you know, it was hard hearing everything that was being said and stuff and wanting to like jump ahead. But I just thought, no, I'll keep going in order. You know.
Yeah. And so with that, I'm not going to put you on the spot to talk about something that you haven't listened to yet. Let's just get right into since that was the first part of the episode, are you set up to go over questions about that part?
Sure, sure. Um, Yeah, well, first of all, oh, and I also wanted to acknowledge you did post a very magnanimous, open, you know, post on the Facebook page that said, I genuinely am inviting people to talk about things that changed for them or new information that they heard
Yeah.
the prosecutors cover and like what is convincing like what is, if you're changing your mind, what's causing that, if you were on the fence, what's causing you to fall on one side or the other. And so there was a lot of discourse there. We didn't pull any of that since it wasn't technically follow-up, but was there any of that you wanted to cover that we didn't just talk about?
I do, but I want to go through the questions first to make sure I'm
Okay,
not jumping ahead of some of the questions. But I will
that's a
say that
very
that
good
post
thought.
I put up essentially I said if you previously thought Adnan was innocent and you heard the prosecutor's series and now you think that he's guilty, can you explain what it was about it that changed your mind? And I had made a request. I'm like, please, we're not going to argue. We're not going to make shitty comments to each other. Let's just have a nice dialogue. And that's like the best Facebook post we've ever had on that page. Last I
Yeah.
looked, there was like 360
Oh yeah,
comments,
there were a ton of
and
ton of comments.
everybody's being very civil and they're talking
I
about
agree.
facts. And so people are debating some things here and there, but it's a really good. So if you're on the fan page and you haven't seen it, I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's probably pushing 400 comments on it now.
Yeah.
But it's a really good discussion, and I'll get into some of that here in a minute. But let's get to the questions first.
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, shout out to Jesse, who simply said the prosecutors gave a convincing closing argument. No hesitation. I look forward to your continued rebuttals. Christine says, and Allie kind of echoed this sentiment. Does Bob have any inside knowledge about the rose, baby's breath, and floral paper found in Hayes' car? I don't know if this is something you're going to get into. I'm sure you will in a future episode. But has Hadnan's legal team provided an explanation as to why they were there and when they were placed there? Are you in a place to talk about that now?
No, I mean, I can talk. It's kind of like what I did this week, where on our main feed here, I just talked a little bit about it without diving deep into it. But what I can say is the rose and the floral paper,
Mm-hmm.
that was new information to me. It was there the whole time. I don't know if I just read past it because I thought it was, the rose that, Adon had given her way back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as I thought more about it, it couldn't be that rose. Number one, she said in her diary that she had put the rose in a room or whatever, but also she didn't have her car yet when that
Mm-hmm.
happened. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that one. I think the prosecution didn't really use it, and I think that's why it didn't really mean much to me.
Mm.
I know from from learning a lot about how fingerprints work that like paper like that is the best thing ever to hold a fingerprint forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen I haven't dug deeply into it, but I've read a lot of like discussions about it, even like old Reddit threads about it and stuff, like what
Mm-hmm.
people I like to read like on Reddit, people that think that Adnan is guilty to see like, okay, like this is probably the place to find the best argument for it.
Sure.
And it seems like most people agree that it's probably not anything from like connected to the crime. There was an instance when Adnan, and this comes from, and these are the types of thing I need to get into the case file and find these interviews to be able to cite them. From what I read, one of Adnan's friends might have been Juwan,
Mm-hmm.
talked about a time in December where Adnan had taken a rose to Hay at work, and he did not get the same reaction from her. Then it was like right before they broke up.
Mm.
As the first time where she thought it was the sweetest thing in the world, it was kind of like she thought it was childish, and that he came there and gave her the rose. Remember, she's there working with Don.
Sure.
And so the kind of just based, and again, don't quote me on this because I haven't deep dived into it. Kind of the thing most people seem to believe is that it's probably that Rose. Like she just, because it sounds like she, she kind of lived, her car was a mess. There was so much stuff in it that it got tossed into the back seat and it was left there. Most people don't think it came from that day, even the people on the guilty side, because they don't know, like when, maybe when Adnan had left and was gone with Jay during the day, but they're like, well, then he'd have to buy it. And then he doesn't have his car. So he'd be carrying this rose around with him all day. Nobody saw him with a rose. When could he have given it to her? And again, since the prosecution didn't use it, it probably seemed like it must have been an old dried up rose, I'm guessing, that was in the back. So that's something that I had not caught before.
Mm-hmm.
And probably because, I was looking at it from, back in the day when we were going through this, the entire case file wasn't just open and available. We were kind of getting it as Undisclosed would do an episode, then they put the documents out. They do an episode, they put the documents out. I had access later towards the end, because I had developed a relationship with Robbie. There was stuff that she had shared with me that was just like the full case document stuff
Mm-hmm.
that at that point wasn't available. But I had never paid any really attention to the rose. So that was one thing that the prosecutors did. That was new information for me, and I was glad that they brought it out, because now I know about it, because that's just, I want to know everything, and that's something new.
Yeah. Okay. Jamie says, I know Adnan hasn't said much, if anything, publicly since his release from prison, which is totally understandable. Do you think he'll make any sort of statement once his case works its way painfully slowly through the court system? Do you think there's a decent chance that alternative suspects will be investigated if Adnan gets a favorable final ruling? And if this is a long one, but a question that I think many people have. Thanks, Jamie. If yes, who do you think they will and should investigate? Thanks for all your time and efforts covering this case. I know it's incredibly time consuming. So that's a few different things I can go back and reread instead of
I
hurling
think I got
three
it.
at you at once.
Let me know if I miss anything. But as far as Adnan making a statement, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't have any inside knowledge to that. I've never much, and I didn't realize that people didn't realize this. I don't know Adnan. I've never spoken to him. I've never exchanged a letter with him or a text message or a phone call. I've never met.
Right.
I have zero relationship with Adnan.
Yeah.
So I don't have, I am very good friends with Rabia, but Rabia doesn't share anything with me, because there's all this legal stuff going on, and
Sure.
all that stuff needs to be kept between them and the legal team. I would assume any decent lawyer would tell him not to make a statement
Yeah.
at all. There's nothing good that can come with that, so I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah. And that actually reminds me, on the Facebook post that we were just talking about that you posted, I did see someone who said that, and I don't want to misquote, but I'm paraphrasing. It seemed that person said that the thing that made them feel like Adnan must be guilty, or the thing that pushed them over the edge, was that they felt that he was not thankful for all of the help and the donations and stuff that were put forward. And that made me really sad, regardless of what you think about the trial or the case, or the, like, that made me really sad, because that doesn't say anything about whether or not someone committed crime, is whether or not they seem grateful for what was done for them. But also, I think you're right. I think it's highly likely that he is been told not to say anything. And my impression, having, by the way, donated, and I will be totally horrified. I'm not a sunk cost person. If something vastly different happens and there is information that proves that Adnan killed Hay, I will be very upset, and I will have donated money towards a cause that was unnecessary, and if working the opposite of truth and justice. But she has been extremely vocal about thanking everyone who have been part of that cause. So that broke my heart. So, person, if you're listening, I'm so sorry and sad that you feel like that's what makes you think that Adnan is guilty, because I promise you there is a lot of information out there where people are speaking on his behalf because they can.
Yeah.
That he is extraordinarily grateful. So,
and I think any lawyer would tell you that his attorneys would tell him, you don't speak in public at all, period. That's just part of the course. Now, as far if I remember correctly on the question, the next part was, do I think that there will be an investigation into alternate suspects if there's a favorable outcome? That's hard to say, because you have, I think Ivan Bates, who's the DA now, he's been pretty vocal that he believes Adnan is innocent, and that he would that he would not pursue a prosecution of Adnan. I'm pretty confident that the Maryland Supreme Court is going to overrule the lower court's decision and leave the conviction overturned. Because it's understand, for those of you that don't know, what's happening with the case right now is the court above the court that overturned the conviction has said that because Young Lee, Hayes' sister or Hayes' brother, didn't have enough notice to appear at the hearing and weigh in on it, that his rights were violated, and so it should be reinstated. That's up to the Supreme Court. From what I understand, that there's really not much or any case law about that. It's also a tough argument to make because, in my opinion, because when his attorney said that, well, he couldn't get here in time, and they said, okay, well then we can bring him in on Zoom, which defendants have been on Zoom in court, and they said, well, he doesn't get off work until whatever time, and the judge said, okay, well then we'll wait. So we waited like an hour or so until Young got off of work, and then he was able to Zoom in and able to make his statement before this was done. So personally, as a non-lawyer, I would be surprised if this case isn't resolved at the Maryland Supreme Court and it's over with. If it happens that the court does say nope, Young Lee's rights were violated, he needed to have notice for that hearing, and so they'll remand that back down to the trial court where all this happened to begin with, and then very likely the exact same thing will happen. They'll just give Young Lee his notice. Ivan Bates will do the same thing Marilyn Mosby did. The conviction will be overturned, and we'll be right back where we started, most likely. As far as alternate suspects, the problem is you still have some people in that office, and certainly people in the police department, that are still maintaining that Adnan is guilty. And oftentimes in these situations, they're very reluctant. Even when the conviction has been overturned, they'll refuse to look anywhere else. So we'll see how that goes. And that's one of the reasons why it's a bit frustrating with what's happened with the prosecutor's podcast, and they've convinced so many people they're guilty. Legally speaking, does it matter what's said on a podcast and what people think? No, but public pressure is a thing. And if now all of a sudden there's all these people that used to think Adnan is innocent all screaming that he's guilty, there's certainly no pressure anymore on Baltimore PD or that DA's office or anyone to try to figure out who actually did this, because now there seems to be a big wave of public outcry that Adnan's actually guilty. And that's extremely upsetting to me, because I don't think that he's guilty. I don't think that they proved anything. But now, like, this wave of support has flipped, and that's it. It's important to me. It's important to me that at least the record is out there and clear, and that's why I'm hoping that Brett Nallis will come on and we can have a conversation where everybody in public and both public feeds can hear all the major points of contention that I have with the way they presented it, to where rather than a Twitter war or podcasts battling back and forth with each other, that we can just be together on an episode and say, well, and I can tell them, like, listen, I have an issue with this because this document, because I'm curious to hear if their response is, oh, I didn't see that. And then and does that change your mind? Or if they just think that it doesn't matter. So hopefully that will happen. As far as if they investigate alternate suspects and who, that's not for me to decide. I mean, I have, you guys have heard my analysis years ago, where who I think that would be a suspect worth looking further into. We have this new information about the DNA. There's new information out about Sellers and Bilal. I have no idea who did this, so hopefully that they would put the people that have access to all the information will follow all those leads and figure out who did it. And that's not up for me to decide.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Jamie Grayson says, given all we know about this case, do you think that Adnan would get a fair trial if everything being as it, everything, if everything turned on the idea of, yes, his conviction has been vacated, but the state decides to try him again, can he get a fair trial?
I don't, it depends on your perspective, right? So if you're one of the people that think Adnan is guilty, from your perspective, would it be a fair trial? Probably not.
If you're
If
a
you think
person who thinks
Adnan's
it's, yeah.
Yeah, if you think Adnan is innocent, will he get a fair trial? I think that he would.
I don't
Because
know. I don't know. I mean, the thing is, you could argue that from both sides. You could say there's been all of this information that's out there that could sway a jury one way, and you could say there's all this information out there that could sway a jury another way. So I don't know.
I
I
think
don't know.
Jay, the reason I think that it would be, there's no way he gets convicted again in a new trial, is I don't think Jay can testify.
I'm sure you're
It,
right.
and they have nothing with Jay. I mean, not only, they already had all these inconsistent statements. Now we have people that have like dug into every detail that can show every single thing he said that is wrong and conflicts and doesn't match up with everything from the cell phone evidence to his own statements. And then on top of that, he's made public statements since trial. You know, he had the Intercept interview. We had the little bit from Serial. When he talked to when he talked to the producers from the HBO documentary, he said that the idea of the Best Buy came to the police. How do they go to trial and then he'd be on the stand and he gets confronted with the statement that you said that the Best Buy, that whole local Best Buy, was provided to you by the police? You know, all that is so, he was already problematic. He's even more problematic. And that's only if you could get him to testify anymore. Back then, they were holding a death penalty over his head. And that's confirmed fact. His lawyer came on and said they were threatening him with the death penalty before he set up to testify at trial. If he didn't put it on Adnan, he was going to, they were telling him he was going to be put to death for it.
Right.
He doesn't have any of that hanging over his head anymore now. So I don't know that Jay, whether Adnan's innocent or guilty, whether Jay's telling some version of the truth or not, I don't think he wants to be in the middle of this anymore at all. And he may not even testify. If he does, it'll be worthless testimony. The cell evidence won't have, I mean, you have the higher courts that have already looked at this and ruled on it and did determine that it was unreliable, which means it wouldn't pass the Fry test or whatever test they're going to use to see if it comes in. So they would probably have to go to trial without Jay's testimony and without the cell phone evidence. And you even have Jen, if I remember correctly, Jen Pusateri, I believe I believe on the HBO, and Janet, you would know this better than me because you've probably seen it since I have. But didn't she say in the HBO documentary she's not even sure if Adnan did it at this point?
I don't remember. I remember that Jen seemed very confused and very conflicted and just kind of I remember more, this is not helpful. I remember more the feeling of Jen and the feeling of her confusion and dismay
Yeah.
during that interview more than I remember what her exact words were. So I'm not a good resource for that.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not quoting her, but and somebody either in the chat or on Friday when this drops, if you guys let me know on Facebook. But the way I remember her saying, I don't even know if Adnan's guilty anymore. Like I don't know what to think. Which the reason that's sticking in my mind is because they were talking about all the things with the schedule and all these at work, which are confusing. But then I remember thinking, what do you mean? Your story is that Jay told you right after it happened that you went with him to wipe fingerprints off of shovels and picks and throw them in a dumpster. How, if that actually happened, how could you possibly be not sure if it happened or not based on some schedule, or something that doesn't line up with a timeline? Like, how would you get past that? So someone correct me if I'm wrong about that, but point being, if that's accurate, that's a statement that she would have to be confronted. The state doesn't have a case, I don't think,
Right.
if they go to trial again, which again, if you're on the guilty side, I think that you would probably feel like that's not a fair trial. If you're on the guilty side and you believe somewhere in there Jay's telling the truth, somewhere in there Jen's telling the truth, and the cell phone evidence is accurate, and that if the state had to go to trial without any of that stuff, that would seem unfair to you, I would think.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I would say on the post that you made, it seemed that there were definitely a couple folks who kind of cited Jen's participation or her testimony as being
Yeah.
maybe the linchpin to why they felt either conflicted or they felt like Adnan must be guilty because how and why would she ever have been a part of anything? Were there not some grain of truth?
That was the most common thread that I saw when I was reading through, was people saying, the way the prosecutors laid it out, it has occurred to me, how do you get past Jen? And the thing that, and I questioned a few people on it as we went through, because that was, again, the most common thing was Jen told this story before the police had the cell phone records and before they talked to Jay. And that was really intriguing to me, because we know and that was stated it's not their fault. That was stated on the prosecutor's podcast multiple times.
Yeah.
But the question that I was posing to people was, first of all, I don't know where they came up with they didn't have the cell phone records. They absolutely did have the cell phone records before that. I believe it was on, and again, in the bonus series, we'll get into all the details of this, but I believe it was like on the 16th or 17th of February, they had the phone records and the cell locations. And then there's a time when they confused a spot on a map, because there's two identical addresses, but one's like Cantonsville and one's Baltimore. Yes. And we see where Jay's story lines up with this, and then they get the new information, and all of a sudden it changes to come over here. Interestingly enough, if the cell phone records are corroborating Jay, why does Jay's story change when the police figure out a mistake on the cell phone map? That's story for another day. But the fact is, they absolutely did have the cell phone records by then, and the cell towers.
Found Jen, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know where that comes from. So we can take that away. And then the other thing that I was posing to people is, would it make a difference to you? Because some people are like, oh, I always thought he was guilty, and that's perfectly fine. But the purpose of me making that post and having that discussion is I'm very curious about the people who did think that Adnan was innocent and have now changed their mind. Like, what was the thing that changed their mind? Because I want to see, like, is there something that I missed through the series? Was there a thing that was legitimate, solid new evidence that I didn't catch that has changed their mind? And that was the big thing was, well, Jen talked to the police before Jay talked to the police. So the story couldn't have come from the police yet, when they did that. And the fact that Jen's there with her attorney. And the question I posed was, would it make a difference to you if you knew that Jay did talk to police before Jen talked to the police? Right. And there was some debate in there with people, but here's my position in that thread and here now. As far as I'm concerned, we absolutely know that Jay talked to the police multiple times before Jen talked to the police. Now, this requires a little bit of weed digging to get this. So I don't even fault Brett and Alice for not figuring this out. But they did say they were looking through the defense file. In the defense file, we see the interviews with Sis, which was Jay's boss at the video store. And she says there was, I know for sure one, maybe even two occasions where the police came to the video store. Correct. Prior to, and she even gave him like the date on when I was like February 21st. Right. They came and picked Jay up and took him to question him. Right. And when he got back, she said, "Is that about that murder?" And he said, "Yeah." So that's at least one or two occasions. Yeah. Ernest Carter said that he saw Jay in a police car talking to people, or talking to the police prior to Jen. The fact that when they went to talk to Jen, they went looking for Jen, even though Jen's name is not the one on the cell phone records. It was an account under her mother's name, and you might think that she was there looking for Patrick, but or Jen's brother, because he was also friends with Jay. But either way, they had no way to know that it was Jen they were looking for unless someone told them that's Jen's number, because that's not what's on the records. Right. That likely came from Jay. And these are all corroborating things. And then the biggest one is Jay. Jay said the police were talking to him and harassing him and questioning him over and over and over again before they talked to Jen. Those are Jay's words.
Don't believe Jay. I mean, you say the biggest one, but like, Jay's a liar. So
but
he might have been lying about that.
You're right. And that's exactly the argument that people had said. Well, you say that you can't believe Jay, so believe. I'm like, right, but you say you can believe Jay. You know what I mean? So enough. It's this weird conundrum. So if somebody's like, right. I think Adnan's innocent, and I believe that Jay's story is true, and I say, well, Jay said the police were harassing him repeatedly, and they were questioning him multiple times before he ever talked to Jen. And they're like, well, you can't believe Jay. I'm like, you can't have it. I mean, sure, I can't have it both ways either.
Yeah, you have to. It has to neutralize. That neutralizes. But the fact that his own boss said that he was questioned and he was not working at that store, like there's a very specific time in which he started working at that store, and so there's like there's ways of corroborating that.
in any one of those things, if it was just Jay said, well, yeah, the police talked to me a
Right.
whole bunch of times and they were harassing me and I wasn't giving them all the information and I was talking to them until they finally talked to Jen, be like, well, it's another one of Jay's stories, so take it or leave it. But
Right.
in this instance, and these are the things that we're looking for, as Brett said, try to find the things that you can confirm outside of things Jay said.
Right.
You have
Correct.
his boss at work. You have
Yes.
Ernest Carter.
Yes.
You have the fact that they knew it was Jen that they were looking for.
Right.
All those things together with the fact that Jay says they talked to him multiple times before. It's hard to, as the way I put it, like there's a lot of things in this case that are up for debate. I don't think it'd be very difficult to make the argument that the police did not talk to Jay before that. It's impossible to make the argument that they didn't have the cell phone
Right.
records at that point. We know for a fact they did. And some people were like, huh, I'll have to go through, because and there were people that had said, the people on both on Facebook and on Twitter and some DMs and stuff that I had that were like, well, they convinced me on this. And I said, well, everything I just said here.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I literally forgot why I thought Jen was,
Right.
why I still thought he was innocent, even with Jen. But that's why, is because they didn't mention any of that. And the big one was they continually say the police didn't have the cell phone records, so they couldn't create this story. But the fact is that they absolutely did have the cell phone
All right.
records.
Well, I'm sure that was just a innocent oversight on their part. Michelle says, no parsing of a timeline matters until the lividity evidence is taken into account, period. Whoever killed Hay kept her for hours before taking her to Leakin Park. There is no timeline for Adnan as the murderer that accounts for this evidence.
Yeah, and they made a concerted effort to do away with the lividity evidence as you go through, and we're going to get into all that stuff in detail later. But one of the things in the closing episode, they kind of did two closing episodes together in that package of their closing, is they're very good they are very good attorneys. They are very good at painting a picture that sounds about right. The double diamond pattern, the pressure marks from lividity.
Mm-hmm.
It starts out as Brett says, some people think these are pressure marks. And then he starts talking about them like they're an injury, like they're an old wound, or it could be a new wound. Yeah. Like you watch the evolution. The conversation starts with pressure marks, and by the end, it's a scratch on her. He didn't say a scratch,
Right.
but the way it's presented, they leave you with, who knows? We don't know what. And by the way, when they dug up that grave, they weren't looking for little things. We don't know what could have been in there. And so they did away with it. But people talk about the lividity in the fact that she had full frontal fixed lividity and she was on her side. She was twisted up a bit, and people have made, but her face could have been down. And even though her arm, her right hand is up by her left shoulder, but somehow she could have still been flat and her body was twisted. Argue about that till you're blue in the face. The double diamond mark on her shoulder, which people have been trying to identify for years, that is a pressure mark. It's not an injury. I've seen the photos, like the actual photos from the autopsy. It is a pressure mark. That is an item that was pressed against her skin right there for at least 8 hours to make that mark. That item was not in that grave. And to say that they just didn't look that close and they didn't do it, that's ridiculous. They brought in an archaeologist to excavate her. They sifted through every single grain of dirt when they were digging her up, and there was no big solid double diamond anything in that grave, and that's huge. But I mean, again, they're very good. When you hear Brett talk about it, you're like, oh yeah, that's nothing. By the time you're done, I'm just like, yeah, what was I worried about that thing for? But it's huge. It's there's no getting around it. There's absolutely, that's why there's so many people were so convinced. It wasn't because of lining up cell towers and pings and Jay's story and conflict. It's because there are some very basic things that prove that this didn't happen. And that's one of them. You have to show me somewhere in that grave where there was something of that shape that was pressed against her skin for 8 hours when she was supposedly buried 4 hours after she was killed. And that thing's not in there. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Katie says, I'm re-listening to Undisclosed. The depth of their investigation into the cell phone evidence is so impressive. Honestly, after their Ping episode, the cell phone data seems meaningless. I can't wait for Bob to get into it. Question, Was it not established that Jay went to a birthday party with Adnan and Stephanie a few days after Hay disappeared? The person, maybe Krista, whose party it was, knows when her birthday is. For me, that's a solid time anchor. That makes the whole I have to keep Stephanie away from a mad murdering Adnan narrative nonsense.
Yeah, that
I don't
and
know if that must come up somewhere in the recent conversation.
it's probably from undisclosed, but yeah, that's one of those things that I'm not really because that gets into like people's opinions and stuff, and I don't want to argue about people's opinions. I see, but yeah, that was I think brought up on undisclosed that Jay saying that I was afraid he was going to hurt Stephanie. I was in like he was at a party with Stephanie at Krista's birthday party. Remember, it was that Friday night birthday party. I think it was after the ice storm or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a thing that happened, but we can. And just as easily as you can say, clearly Jay wasn't scared, somebody else can say, well, Jay didn't know what Stephanie was doing. There's a million arguments for that.
Yeah.
As far as the cell phone evidence, this, by the way, so these next 2 weeks, this week, which is dropping if you're hearing this Friday, it dropped on Wednesday on Patreon. If you're watching this live tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. on Patreon, the third installment of the reply brief is coming out. And that is part 1 of January 13th, where they're going through a bullet pointed timeline with the statements and the cell phone evidence. So this week and next week is when we're really digging into every single detail about that.
Okay. Carol, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but I think Carol posted, she was very taken aback by, I guess, in some of the argument, the compelling closing argument, as you have put it, what Carol deems to be a sort of made up scenario of Adnan's fantasies of killing Hay. I guess Alice said, we'd all be lying if we didn't at some point fantasize or have some image in our minds of doing something incredibly violent. All of us have murderous rage at some times. And Carol says, my reaction was, what? I can honestly say, and I'm not lying, Alice, says Carol, I've never had that. No matter how mad I've been at someone. And while some people may have them, I think there are plenty of people like me who haven't. The idea of basing a theory on Adnan or anyone having a fantasy without a scintilla of proof is, I guess, in Carol's opinion, not very credible or felt very dangerous, a very dangerous place to go. You need to look for those phrases of, you can imagine that, or I bet I would, I'm sure this must have been what someone was thinking. Like that's maybe
all phrases. Just in general, look out for things like that because that's how gaslighting is done. And you can listen for yourself what you hear there. But those phrases you just mentioned, Janet, are like one of the things that you should always be on the lookout for. That's how people convince you of things, make you think something that you really don't think. With all that stuff. But what she's talking about. So I was on the track at the gym when I heard that part. Alice is glad. I had to stop. I was shocked. And first of all, this got to be the 4th time I've said it. Alice is a badass. Like I would never want to be in a courtroom with her. She gave the most compelling, and it was just like bam, 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 and she just hammered it, and she was like getting mad and fired up. I think it was performative because 5 seconds later she's laughing and giggling with Brett about it. But that's her job, right?
Great prosecutor.
Yeah. But there, as I said in this week's episode, there's no substance at all. Like her entire theory is all about what Adnan was thinking. Like this is nothing that anyone could ever prove. It's a, I don't know how long it is, 5 or 10 minute diatribe about what Adnan was thinking. But the part where I had to stop was when she said, everybody, and you're lying if you don't admit it, everybody has thought about wanting to kill people. And I was like, what? Like, I don't know first of all, there's a lot of this that goes on in lots of places. This is one of the places with them. There's a lot of us through this series where there's these huge generalities made where it's like anybody would do this and everybody does this, kind of the same thing you were just talking about, Janet. And that's one of them. Essentially she's saying that, Adnan had this murderous rage and these murdery thoughts about Hay, but most of us, when we think that stuff, we don't actually do it, but he did it. But it was just one of those things. It was like, it worked. But like when you listen through, and that's when I made the post too, is like, what specific things convinced you? Because my hope is people go back and listen again. Like, man, that because the first when I saw the social media, I saw the social media post before I heard their episode, and all I saw was, holy shit. Alice just sealed the deal for me. Alice explained it all. I mean, poor Brett didn't get like nobody was giving Brett props at all. It was Alice, Alice, Alice. And so I was listening, and it's tough for me. I had to be like, okay, you need to be open minded.
Right.
You need to be objective, and let's see if she changes your mind. And when I heard it, I'm kind of trained not to be like caught up in emotions, but be listening for facts. And I'm like, what? Like, there's nothing. Like, it was great speech, not a single fact in it. The entire speech was about what Adnan was thinking, which I guess when I thought back, it's fair because it's a theory. She said it's her theory.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to have a theory about anything that you want to.
Yeah.
But I was expecting, based on how many people were persuaded by it, that it was going to be at this time, this happened, and this fits here, and this is how it went down. That's what I was expecting from theories. Brett got closer to that, but he didn't do any of that. He just said, there's a basic story that emerges.
Right.
Trust me, without doing any of that stuff.
Well, Alice, I know she was only doing it as a theory on a podcast. And so I hope that she applies that passion and commitment and persuasiveness to cases and has the facts to support them and is putting people in prison who should be there. And that's, and that it's all going towards truth and justice. Like, because that is amazing.
Hope so.
Yeah. Super impressive. Okay. I think we're running short on time. Jennifer, you made a very thoughtful post with 4 different points. I think we probably don't have time to cover them, but people feel free to sort of, and we've sort of talked about this. We've talked about kind of who tells the best story being something that happens on both sides. You can be an amazing defense attorney and defend somebody who is guilty as sin. And if you tell a great story, that person will not go to prison and may live, kill again or steal again or what have you. It works both ways. But Jennifer, we understand your thinking and your feeling about kind of evidence versus persuasion. Again, that works both ways across the board.
Yep.
So thank you for all of that. I like that you ended it with, okay, as you all were, like as you were, everyone, I'm done. And that actually takes us into talking very, very briefly about Luke Mitchell before we get deeper into his case. But there are some things in here that I think we actually might want to put a pin in because they talk more about things that I think you're going to be revealing or talking about or analyzing in future episodes.
How about this? And I know, and I hate because I know you've been super busy and you put a lot of work into it. But we're already coming up on almost an hour now. And that was such a 30,000 foot view of that
everyone.
case.
Sorry, everyone who only wanted to hear about Luke because it's a new case and we ended up talking for an hour. So sorry, guys.
Yeah, and that's my fault because I'm pretty sure I talked for 59 minutes of that hour. But I think that because it was such a 30,000 foot view, and this week I'm getting into writing like the specifics and the details. We're getting really into Jody's background and Luke's background and the geography. We're even going to talk a little Black Dahlia in this first episode. Why don't we go ahead and close things out for now?
Makes sense. All of this will be preserved and make sense in future episodes too.
That's great. Yeah, so we can roll that stuff over to next week. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of questions. I'm super excited to get into it. And I'm super excited. We've got a ton of new people on the fan page from Scotland that have and the UK that have poured into the page that are this is a case. This seems to be like the West Memphis 3 case of Scotland and parts of the UK. So there's a ton of people. I've gotten a ton of messages and comments from people that are super excited that we're going to be talking about this. So if you're new, first, welcome. Secondly, sorry that you tuned in to hear about Luke's case, but we're gonna get into the weeds on it this week. And next week's follow-up will be answering all questions about that because the prosecutors are done. So the rest of my commentary and their stuff, this is the 4th time I said this, will be all on the bonus series. Also, I should apologize to the people that are here on the main feed that are sick and tired of hearing about Adnan's case. And we just spent all this time talking about it again. I think I'm done because there's nothing new.
Love you guys.
Yeah, there's nothing new coming out. We're getting into this case, the Luke Mitchell case. It's fascinating. Janet and I were just talking in the Patreon pre-show about how I was digging into maps and aerial images, and I'm already and this is why I've always never done an international case, because the first thing I did is like, oh, I want to go there. I want to walk that trail. I want to see that
Sure.
area, and I want to understand like what it feels like walking through there and stuff. But we're going to get into all of that next week. But I think for now, we should let this thing be over with. I should stop rambling. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for joining us on the YouTube chat. Oh, Kelly, thank you for reminding me. One last thing, Kelly Zappas, who is on the Truth and Justice fans page, which, by the way, if you're new, it's on Facebook, the official Truth and Justice podcast fans page is what it's called. There are other ones out there that are very far from fan pages that are like Truth and Justice, like that. On the official page where I'm at, where Kelly's at, Kelly is helping us put together, arrange some like interviews for episodes, like when we're done with Luke's case, when we're still in this kind of in between major seasons, things that we can do that are like we did with Eric, with the search and seizure stuff, like experts on things where we can just kind of learn and help educate ourselves. Kelly has asked for you guys to let her know what topics that you would like to hear about. And I think the best way to do that, I was going to say tag Kelly, but I think, Kelly, the better thing to do is on Friday, why don't you go ahead and make a post, and we'll pin it, asking so people could just comment under your post. You don't have to go searching for all of those. But if you have a topic that you'd love to learn about, definitely let Kelly know, because she's on the ball on that one.
I just want to say Bob made it seem like that was his idea, and Kelly's note to us literally says she's going to create a post about it on the Facebook page on Friday.
I don't have my glasses on, so all I saw was her name come up.
You're like, Kelly, I see your note. My idea is that you create a post on
It sure
Friday
does. The end of her comment on YouTube says, I'll create a post Friday for suggestions.
You never have to worry, because we'll always call Bob out on his shit. It's fine.
Brilliant minds think alike. That's the way I see it. Speaking of Friday, last thing we're done. I'm just super excited. I have a Zoom meeting with an innocence organization on Friday with a team of lawyers who have a couple of cases that they want us to cover. Sounds like from talking to them, they will not be full long seasons. It'll be more like Pablo Velez's type seasons, where it's a shorter one while we're building up to the new one. I've also heard from the case selection team that they are going through their phases and they're narrowing down the next big case. So we are progressing and moving closer to that. Awesome. But we got a lot of good stuff coming.
Great.
So that's it. Thank you, Kelly. And you're welcome for my great idea about you making a post. We love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody. We miss you, Zach.
All right, we can stop on our audio.
Great.
Oh, so stupid. I'm sorry. She did. So I didn't have my glasses on, and I just was closing out, and I saw, oh, there's a super chat, and I'm like, oh, it's Kelly. Oh yeah, Kelly. And so I just said my thing, did not read it. And yeah, sure does right there.
Oh, thanks, Kelly.
Yep. So if anybody has any super chats, anything burning questions you have, if you're new here on the YouTube chat, one of our UK people, I wish I could say that things aren't normally like this, but they're pretty much usually like this, except for we're on we'll be on the topic you're interested in for the next several weeks.
100%.
After this.
100%. I like to get into those weeds.
I'm looking at some good questions coming in here.
Stuff that people are putting in just right here for Kelly.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. Lilia says, I'd love to hear about the changing face of evidence at trial. That would be interesting. Anything else?
Kristen, when you say alternate suspects for Kelly, do you mean, and maybe I missed a piece of this, but do you mean like the kind of thing we've talked about where we don't understand why like the way judges in different states and in different jurisdictions and just different judges can sort of decide what sometimes seems kind of arbitrary about like whether you can or cannot bring up alternate suspects?
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I assume it's... Yeah, I assume she's talking about the conversation we've had like in season 12 where they weren't allowed to argue alternate suspects.
That's my interpretation of it, Kristen. I was just seeing if that was right, because that's a definite big one for me too. I'm really glad you brought that up. If so, yes, okay, that's right.
And one of them here is Capri says, I'd like to know if there are any recent court cases that set new precedents for wrongful conviction and a review of how they may impact future cases. That would be a super interesting one.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Capri. Awesome.
Very good. All right. If we don't have any super chats, we're gonna I always feel bad about this because for me, like I'm like, it's 9 o'clock, I'm done. And it's just now getting close to dinner time for you, and I always keep you on here. Janet,
Oh, you don't even know. I have to. In addition to all the other work I've been doing, my friend's birthday party is tonight, and instead of just everyone going and having a good time, she's like, "I want everyone to present something. You have to present on a topic that blah blah blah." And I was like, "I have homework
uh,
for a birthday party." Like I have not prepared anything, so I
also
have 45
can we
minutes to come up with something brilliant.
can we discuss? Do you have a birthday party every Tuesday night? Didn't you have one last week too?
Yeah, that was Brandon's.
Yeah, and then like a week or two before that, you had one.
That
You
was
you went to the
Jessica's. Yeah.
you went to the escape
This
room.
is all part of kind of the same group. So the problem is, you see, is once you do something for one person's birthday in a group and they all have birthdays near each other, you have
It's
to like
all
keep showing, like you have to be like, and for your birthday, we're gonna do
oh.
that.
Sometimes it's awesome. Way back in the day when I first got in the fire department, there was like a group of us that all hung out. That were all kind of new guys in the department and our spouses, and I remember we started calling it like the circle. And then like
Uh-huh.
everything we did socially
Sounds
was
like a
like,
cult.
yeah, everybody had to be. And then it got to be this weird thing where like because like I had like my buddy Chad has been my longtime friend who I've always hung out with and done stuff, and I'd be like, hey Chad, you want to go grab a beer after work or whatever, and somebody else would maybe tag along, and then all of a sudden like the other 5 people in the
Uh-huh.
circle are like, oh, I guess I'm out of the circle then. Whatever, it like turned to this
Yeah.
weird thing. Grayson, thank you very much for the super chat. Also Kelly, thank you for your super chat. He says, great work, guys. I also look forward to the new case. I'm glad we get to hear cases from across the pond. Me too. I'm really excited about doing that. It's one of those things that people have always, the people that live across the pond have asked me to like cover this. Like Luke's case has come up a bunch of times,
Yeah.
and in kind of the long form, because it's hard. Like I don't have case files for it. I have just some, what's online, which are some appellate documents. So I'm relying on a lot of interviews and like um uh, work that other people have done to draw
Yeah.
information out and try to piece it together. So I'm hoping to provide something new by doing that. But it's nice in this kind of shorter form to be like, well, we can put together 6 episodes and for sure um bring some awareness to this
Mm-hmm.
case that hasn't been out there.
Cool.
um
I just want to give a quick shout out to Teresa, who's not a super chat, but Teresa, I just feel your pain. Teresa says, what are the best options for those of us who do not use or do not want to use Facebook? I really, really understand.
yeah, I don't want to use Facebook. I kind of have to. But
Are there alternatives? Like Twitter is not
to get a hold of
great.
me, you can always go to the
Email.
website and send
Okay.
hit the contact form or send an email. Um, if you're one of those people, like I'm not inviting everyone to do that because as I already get 100 emails a day. So for me to try to say that, yeah, I'll just relay them all over to Kelly. But if you are like not on Facebook and you have a burning topic that you want to get to Kelly, Teresa, just send it through the contact form on the website, and I'll make sure I get it over to her. And Jennifer Hill with the super chat. Thank you so much, Jennifer. She said, Bob, I didn't know until last week that you were married 4 times. 4 times.
That was a great pre-show. That was a
Only
very fun
two.
pre-show.
Oh yeah, that was from the Patreon
Yeah.
pre-show. Yeah, and the principal walking in while I
Uh-huh.
was doing that.
Great
Been having
time.
a lot of fun doing my class. I was going to ask you, Janet, and I don't know that this will come up, but I think it might. So
Mm-hmm.
right now I'm working on interview techniques with my students.
Mm-hmm.
So last week I like taught them about like having a form, a basic outline for your interview, but then active listening and then asking follow-up questions. So I had like students interview each other. This week we're working towards, let's get into somebody outside the class, but somebody you're still comfortable with, like a family member, and I'm going to have them
Mm-hmm.
like record them.
Mm-hmm.
We're eventually in this section, I want to get up to where people interview someone they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, it'll be people from around the community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I thought it'd be cool for some students. So like one of them, like today, was like going on. I was talking about body language because I was showing them videos of like interviews.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a neat thing. So I went through like um I showed them like they're like, I'm like, who do you really want to?
Uh-oh, you just froze for me. Am I frozen for you? Hello?
Oh, we're back.
Okay.
But I went through like those, and then I showed like 5-minute interview clips, and to show them like, here's an interview with LeBron James that's so boring, even the people that wanted to hear from him were like tuned out. And we talk about like why, and
Uh-huh.
then like the one with King Vaughn was like there was 10 people in the room and the sound quality was shit, and it was, and then like the one with Taylor Swift, even the people that don't like Taylor Swift were engaged in it, stuff
Yeah.
like that. Stuff
That's
like that.
cool. That's really cool tech. Yeah.
But we got talking about like body language and like we're trying to read your interviewer, like your interviewee, when you want to keep following up, when you want to give them space. And somehow that led to a conversation about one of the students was like, oh, it's like that FBI BAU stuff. I love Criminal Minds. It's so big. And I talked to her after class and I was like, when we do the interview, there's a good chance I might be able to get you an interview with Jim Clemente, who she knew right who he was. And
Oh,
she was like
sure.
over the moon. I haven't asked Jim if he'd do it, but I think he will. But I know that in a few of my classes, when I mentioned you, there were some huge Cora fans that
Oh, yeah.
were so excited that I knew you. So I may ask you later if you may allow a 10-minute interview with a couple of my students if they
Yeah.
get to that point.
Pile it on. Pile the work on.
Yeah, I figured it
Go
would.
ahead and
Yeah.
pile it right on
I'm
me.
gonna
You know
keep
I'm
you're
not going
down
to say no.
you're down now to 35 minutes to prepare for your presentation.
I told Brandon to prepare something for me. I was like, "Will you go ahead and prepare something for me? I'm sure it'll be great."
I'm gonna
We'll
let
see
you go
if that
right now, but I'm
happens.
like, when she said like present something, was it like, are you gonna do a speech on criminal justice reform, or like what do you like?
I don't
What
have
kind
time
of
because
thing?
it has to be like 5 minutes. So I don't have time to do anything. Like anything I would try to talk about with criminal justice reform, I'd be like, anyway, I know it's been 25 minutes, but is everyone having fun?
Maybe you could do a
Um,
nice presentation about the love that your partner and your work buddy share, the love between me and Brandon.
yeah, I'm gonna represent on that, and then I'm gonna show everyone the headshot that you pretended Erica sent me of you.
All right. I'm going to let you go do your thing. We're going to end this thing.
Okay.
Everybody in the YouTube chat, thank you guys every week for tuning in. We really appreciate it and really appreciate your support and your engagement.
We sure do.
And with that, I love you, Janet.
Love you, Bobby. Miss
Bye
you, Zach. Love you
bye.
guys.
You keep
Thanks
saying
for
miss you,
coming and
Zach,
hanging
and I
with
haven't said it
us.
yet, so I probably shouldn't at
You
this
see him
point.
all the time. I only see him once a week, so.
I hung out with him yesterday. All right.
See?
Bye bye.
Bye.
I'm still with you guys. I'm still here.